Smith is a fascinating figure to study because he was active in so many areas and he knew so many important people. He gives you a window onto this country and even other countries, the countries he was visiting, at a particular moment in time.
December 30th, 1898. Dear Mother and Father, Luxor has been more than I expected it would be. Photographs give no idea of it, and as for the moonlight on the great temples of Karnak, they were the finest experiences I've ever had with moonlight, finer than dear Venice, though not more beautiful.
Joseph Lindon Smith was born in October of 1863 in the small industrial city of Pawtucket, Rhode Island. His father ran a lumber mill, and his mother, Emma Greenleaf Smith, she staged plays in the barn that she wrote for her two sons, Joe and a younger brother. His parents wanted him to get a formal academic education. They wanted him to go to college. He resisted. He decided he wanted to be an artist. Smith began his formal education with 2 years at the museum school at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and then went to Paris with his classmate from there, Frank Benson. He studied in Paris at the Académie Julian between 1883 and 85, and his professors there stressed concise draftsmanship, very classic training. It was something that the Impressionist painters were beginning to rebel against.
Denman Ross was a Boston art collector who noticed Smith's work.
There was a painting of Smith's father sitting in a wheelbarrow that caught Ross's attention. He thought Smith was a promising artist and ended up taking Smith all around Europe, paying all the expenses for several years right after Smith finished art school. They stayed close and traveled the world together.
One could argue that the most important turning point in Smith's life occurred in 1886 when he met Henry Newman in Florence, Italy. After he saw Newman's work done in Egypt, he wrote a letter to Denman Ross in which he said, quote, "Newman thinks we ought to go there, and I am quite wild to go to Egypt now. I want to paint some of those fine things." Right after Smith met Newman, he began painting 3 watercolors, 2 of which were very much in Newman's style. So I think that Smith was intent upon trying to create work that was as good as Newman's and possibly sell it for as much as Newman was able to.
I wish I had 3 right hands and 12 eyes, and that a week was composed of 10 days with at least 20 hours of daylight. I may be asking too much, but there's so much I want to do that it makes me quite wild not to be at work at once on a number of things.
Smith, if he could have lived in the past, he would have. He was trying to reproduce the carved walls as if the viewer were seeing them on their own, as if the viewer were standing in front of the relief and not being conscious of the fact that somebody painted it.
In the early 1900s, there was no color photography and there was no way to print large photographs. Smith was hired by the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston to capture the artwork on the walls of Egyptian tombs as they were being discovered.
Some of the happiest moments of my visit came while I was up there looking out over the miles and miles of desert sands and mountains, made glorious and exquisite in the dying sun, with the blue Nile twisting far out of sight into the pink and pale purple distance of the rippling mountains.
In 1898, Joe met Corinna Haven Putnam. She was in Dublin attending a wedding, and they hit it off and ended up getting married the next year in 1899. After they were married, they went to Egypt on their honeymoon.
Together, Joe Smith and Corinna had 3 daughters, Rebecca, Frances, and Lois.
The children were usually in Boston attending school while Joe was off painting in Egypt.
No, I think I sent a telegram home saying, "Off to the temple of the angry wasps with the cheerful and childish pops." We were very rude about our pops. A lot of people came from all over the country to Dublin. They were fascinated by Mount Monadnock. Monadnock had a special spell over people.
Smith was involved, had a passion for the theater that was lifelong, parallel to his passion for art. He created a theater at Loon Point called the Teatro Bambino, a small one, and then a larger one called the Teatro Laguno, which was more of an amphitheater.
He once wrote to Mrs. Hearst that the pageants allowed him to paint with people instead of pigment.
My father was wonderful on stage, and he'd be on stage most of the time, and he'd tell you more or less what you were supposed to say. If you didn't say it, he would cover for that. But we always gave a 4th of July play at the Dublin Lake Club, and that was supposed to be funny. And then in the fall, we gave a pageant on Loon Point in the big theatre. And it was always cold. You would freeze to death. We'd be sort of nymphs, and I wish we'd kept a record of all his plays.
Well, then we had some rather distinguished people. I don't want to sound snobbish. Tell me if it sounds snobbish. But we had some very distinguished people who came and sat in that theater. I think they could seat about 60 people. You had to fight with the ferns to get a good seat in the orchestra.
In addition to producing pageants in Dublin, Smith produced pageants for other people. In 1916, he produced a pageant to celebrate Louis Comfort Tiffany's birthday at the Tiffany Studios in New York. One of the interesting features of the production was that his daughter Frances, who was 12 at the time, appeared inside a 3-foot diameter blown glass globe.
I had to squat sort of in a lotus position with my legs crossed on top of a platform with holes in it, with a fan underneath to blow air up to me. And the air would only sustain my life about 3 or 4 minutes. So Ma had a stopwatch on. Well, my costume was a bit of a disappointment to me because they didn't allow me to wear Tiffany pearls. I was covered with 10-cent store pearls.
When my father started painting, he did portraits, but he ran into trouble there because husbands or wives of his subjects wanted a few chins left out of a picture, or something would be wrong about it. So that he decided to go to Egypt, where the things were all in stone and 5,000 years old, so there were no relatives to complain about it. I think it was the first year he'd gone to Egypt, and he was painting up above the temple, and another little old lady appeared, and she said, I like that painting. She said, have you got any more? And he said, yes, I've done about 20. And she said, I'd like to buy them all. He thought she was crazy. She said, come down, my dear, was on the Nile. And it was Mrs. Phoebe Hearst, William Randolph Hearst's mother.
Smith was a great lecturer, but he also was a comic. He was a prankster. He introduced Mark Twain once with a comic routine, and I guess he followed him as well. And they shared a podium, stringing humor together, and apparently it was quite a great occasion.
Joseph Lindon Smith will present 2 plays at his open-air theater on Loon Point, Dublin, New Hampshire, Saturday, August 29th, 1942. The Princess and the Peasant, a fantasy of old Russia, and the old Chinese artist laughs at last.
Visiting Smith on Loon Point and sometimes participating in pageants or having pageants done in their honor, there was a whole trail of luminaries. There were symphony orchestras who performed with Smith pageants in Chicago, in Boston. Amelia Earhart, Mark Twain was there, Isabella Stewart Gardner came multiple times, General Pershing, whose name is signed on a bench that was out on the family's porch at Loon Point. There are lots of signatures. Why have we lost sight of Smith? He's very difficult to pigeonhole. He doesn't fit in categories. His artistic portfolio was all over the place. He had so many interests. One of the problems with pageants is, of course, that they're completely ephemeral. When they're over, they're gone, and nothing is left unless there happen to be some photographs. There are black and white photographs of some of Smith's pageants. We're lucky enough to have a few film clips done at the very end of his life.
Joseph Lindon Smith isn't widely remembered by a lot of art historians. His paintings of the Egyptian tombs fell out of favor when museums wanted to have only the actual artifacts that had been discovered. His production of pageants also fell by the wayside. There was television and films to attract people's attention for entertainment.
By accompanying him on his journey through life, we get to see another phase of history in a very lively and interesting way.
Dear Mother and Father, I cannot help trying to give you some idea of what the last 16 days have been for me, and of the stupendous giants under whose steadfast gaze I've camped out and drawn and painted and slept under my little tent at their feet. I shall fail to bring home to you the wonderful charm of Abu Simbel, and of the indescribable beauty of the temple under the full tropical moon.
To anybody who wants to pursue the arts, you can do it all if you're creative enough, have enough energy, and have a playful spirit.
They say that a prophet hath no honor in his own country. That is not true, because the three sisters, the daughters of our father, had such a wonderful life with him that he will never be forgotten. So that was what I was going to say at the end of this, because I had little stories about the rest of them. I think we've had enough little stories.